Welcome to Tigs Bits. This one is about the weather. No, not the current conditions outside, but a conversation about our favorite meteorologists, funny stories, storm chasers, and a lot more. We are picking up where we left off on the last show where Blasi and I kind of started talking a little bit about the weather. Please subscribe, like the show if you're watching this on YouTube. Share, like, and follow us if you're watching this on another social media platform, and leave us a review if you're listening to this. All of that just helps to keep this show growing, and we appreciate it. Let's get into it. Boys. It's good to finally have all three of us back on at the same time. It seems like it's been forever. This one's going to be fun for all of us weather geeks, and I know that the three of us are. So everybody humor us for a little bit, please. Okay, y'all can jump in now. Y'all can talk.
Hey, I thought I didn't know how long a spiel you had. I was over here making sure I'm going through my notes. I just want to be prepared. I know kids
I thought
coming
you'd go a little further.
I take a week or two off. You guys that went to NBC Dateline Boot Camp, you guys come back all pro level. I thought you're coming inside. I'm like, oh shit, I'm not prepared. And then the bus hit the brakes, and I'm like, oh shit, I'm not ready.
It's okay.
I'm sorry, Brantley, we're giving you more work here.
This may be left in.
No, I love it.
You started talking about wanting to do something about the weather, and the first thing that came in my mind, it's funny, you would think like some meteorologist or major storm, which those came very rapidly, but the first thing that came to my mind was Randy Travis and that old song, "As long as old men sit and talk about the weather, as long as old women sit and talk about old men." Dude, I used to love Randy Travis, but dude, that's those lyrics somehow. Every time weather's mentioned, I hear Randy Travis singing that one segment of his song.
Hey, that should be a regular thing we do on the show when we bring up a topic. What's the first thing that comes to your mind? That we all three, because all three of us will have something different. That's a good one.
Yeah,
and I know where I was. I was on 30A. I just passed local catch, and I saw the text. And before I even got to the bottom of the bridge, I could hear Randy Travis singing that song. Oh. It's weird how stuff like that works.
When you think of when somebody says weather, we're talking about the weather. What's the first thing you think of, Tigs?
I mean, I immediately think about a meteorologist. I'm a simple person. I mean, I have weather songs and stuff like that. I could start to think of, but no, the first thing I think of is
the weatherman.
Is a weatherman in some extreme conditions, and should I check my radar? That's what I think of. Yeah.
True Louisiana list to go down, checklist to go down when you hear the word.
So.
I'm pretty sure that applies to most of all the way. See, I'm like Blasi though. When you said weather, first thing I thought about when you said we're going to do a show about weather, I wrote down weatherman because first thing I thought was Hank Jr. Weatherman. That's funny. And then I thought James Taylor, Fire and Rain. My wife gets on to me all the time for talking in song lyrics, but hell, I can't help it. I mean, I've listened to more songs than I've read books. I can't help it.
Maybe it's kind of what I do.
Yeah, anyway. I mean, it is exactly what you do. So, yeah, it makes sense. But, I mean, there are an absolute ton of songs about the weather. I mean, that isn't what the path we're going down, but there are a ton of songs about the weather. And
God, you think the first one I asked my wife before I came back here today to the studio, and she said Hurricane, Band of Heathens, which was originally a Levon Helm song.
Right.
That's because she's also from Louisiana, obviously, and the first thing she thinks about is hurricanes. I asked her, what's the first thing you talk about weather? She said, hurricanes. And she's like, and I was like, well, what about leaving? Worst one. She, Sally was pretty bad. We were here a couple years ago. That was pretty bad. But she said when she left home during Katrina and went to Baton Rouge, and that was wild. And we talked about that, but she said that song, and that made me think of what all songs there are. And I mean, you think about how many. Another one, Raindrops Falling on My Head, Heat Wave.
Yeah.
Walking on Sunshine. I mean, it's just the list goes on and on. There's 50 about hurricanes alone. Like a Hurricane, Neil Young. Hurricane about the boxer Bob Dylan. Hurricane Luke Combs a couple years ago.
Blame It on the Rain by Milli Vanilli.
But that's the one. That's the one. Sharice and I, when I said that, because I went down and just Googled a list. When I got to that one, we both dropped into Milli Vanilli. Blame it on the rain.
God, I love Milli Vanilli, dude. I think they got a bad rap. All they did was lip sync. Like there was somebody singing. Like let them just perform, man. I thought that was great.
The person who was singing it perform, for God's sakes. I
let
mean,
the whole thing keep going. Let it keep rolling, dude. Who cares?
The guy who's singing it might have couldn't get out of, was bedridden or something, but he could still blow. They were like, well, let's put him back here and sing, and these guys danced. Boom.
I mean, during that same time period, you had a TV show on called Putting on the Hits, and all they did was get up there lip sync songs, and they judged them and evaluated on. I thought Milli Vanilli did it better than anybody. They would have dominated Putting on the Hits.
They were just before their time, Blasi. They were before their time.
A little bit. It was frowned upon then. I saw them. I saw them in the Cajun Dome. They were fantastic.
Did you really?
Oh, wow.
They really were. Yeah,
you saw them before it got exposed?
Yes, I did. I saw them live. That show, I saw
lucky,
that show live. It was incredible, just incredible. And after the show, my dad, I went with my dad. I was like 10 or 11, something like 12 maybe. And he goes, Brantley, I don't know how those guys were singing. They were doing backflips and having sword fights, and they never lost their breath. Dad caught on. He knew.
All over.
He was
They were
on
doing
it.
backflips and having
They
sword
were
fights.
doing backflips. It was great.
Oh, that's so good.
And then I don't
That
think
is
it
good
wasn't
stuff.
It was
I got my
not
first
long
speeding-
before that thing just.
That's when the wheels came off of
weeks.
Dude, I got my first speeding ticket listening to Milli Vanilli, Blame It on the Rain. And I was going 55 and a 35. I mean, I was coming in hot, coming into op. And, dude, what's funny, the cop pulled me over, and I was in my mom's. She had a Mazda 929. It was the first one they came out with. That thing was luxurious, dude. It had 3 vents that would just sit there and do like this and oscillate. You know, like, it was, it's just so smooth and all lit up. I think they were with LED before LED was LED. But dude, he pulled me over, and he was like, sir, you realize you were doing 55 and the 35? And I was like, yes, sir. And I was like, I'm not going to lie to you. I was like, I was listening to that song by Milli Vanilli, Blame It on the Rain, man. It was just so good. And this car drives so smooth. I was like, I did not realize, but you got me, you know. And he gave me a ticket. But he was super cool about it. Like he was, I didn't get
Was he also a fan?
He kind of laughed about it.
Yeah.
I was honest. I was like, hey man, just
He
blame it on
must
the
have
rain,
not
brother.
hated it.
Don't put no blame on me. You know what I mean? Just blame it on the rain. You know?
Right. And, there's a ton of, like, super big ones, too, like the Beatles, Here Comes the Sun, Somewhere Over the Rainbow. I mean, good Lord. Then there's some, like the 72 hit from the Brady Bunch, It's a Sunshine Day, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Zach Brown, Colder Weather. And then as far as not just songs with weather in the titles or involving in the song, like a November Rain, bands with weather in the name. Only one I could think of is Earth, Wind, and Fire off the top of my head. I mean, it's just sticking
That's
there.
everything.
But, I'm sure
every
there's
weather
more.
event possible. And
Hey,
catastrophic
talking about,
event.
let's pivot out of that. What about talking about famous weather songs and weather names? What about famous names in the weather business? What about famous weathermen? Who are the top weathermen that you guys can think of? And then we'll go off that. Don't you think?
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
no,
yeah.
absolutely.
No, I think that's a good place. Last week's show, Blasi and I kind of hit on a couple of them. That's what started this whole thing of us wanting to dive into it. We start talking. We're kind of correlating Bubba the Love Sponge, watching a guy that we both like, Jeff Petrowski, who's an extreme storm chaser. And he was just butchering Jeff and not even really showing his feed and stuff. But that's what we were talking about. That opened up this door as soon as we wrapped up recording. It was like, we need to do a show about the weather. And and it worked out. We didn't want to do it without you, so we're glad that you're on, because we know you have your takes too. We're all weather geeks.
Oh
yeah, I mean, I'm a weather nut.
God.
I absolutely am. I'm
Extreme
eaten
weather
up
events
with
are
it,
so
but
fascinating, you know. Like,
oh man, they are. But I mean, it all really started with me with Cantore. That was the first.
I agree.
Person and local guys, like in Louisiana, we have a guy. His name's Tom Convica. He's kind of like y'all's James Spann. But he's trustworthy. You knew if he says that he's the GOAT. I mean, he really is. And there's been a lot, but that was who I'd watch growing up as a kid, and then having the Weather Channel. I mean, I didn't watch. I've always watched sports, but if I wasn't watching sports when I was a kid, I was watching the Weather Channel. Like I loved it.
Yeah, right.
Fascinated by it.
I know.
And before the Weather Channel, though, like, so when the Weather Channel came along and Cantore came along, nobody put it in the spotlight like that and been down chasing, getting in, at a hotel, doing hurricanes. Like, I'd never even seen that before. But before that, growing up, I mean, I'm not gonna lie to you, man. There was a cat out of, and I still follow him on Twitter. He was kind of my weatherman as a kid until I realized there's some weatherman that take it to another level as far as getting out in the events. And now there's even more of that. And you'll probably remember this guy, JR. Remember Rich Thomas from WSFA?
Rich Thomas, yeah, he's on my list. Oh, yeah.
He's on, dude.
Oh, yeah, Rich. I got
Rich, dude.
Rich
I mean, I always trusted Rich when things got real. Like, I wasn't going to WTVY in Dothan. I was going to WSFA. And Rich Thomas is going to let you know exactly what's going down.
And I lived on Lake Martin, obviously, and that's right. Most storms came west to east, so they would come through Montgomery. We were northeast of Montgomery, so he was giving me the update I needed because he was coming right at us. But yeah, that was my go-to, Rich Thomas. He's on my list. That's good stuff.
Oh, dude, he could articulate like a storm like really well and like what's going on, and he was very educated on that. So. And he was with those guys for like 20-something, 30 years or something. I don't know, before he ended up leaving the station. But some personal issues, I think, kind of got in the way there. But but
I mean, it happened.
But
James Spann covered the state though pretty much. He was always I think was he based out of Birmingham originally?
Yeah, he's a Birmingham guy. I didn't get to know him until later on either. Like it was
kind of
James
me too.
Spann.
Yeah,
y'all turned me on to him. I had heard of him, and once I saw him, I started following him on Twitter. And once I saw him, I went, "Oh, okay, yeah, I've seen that guy whenever I've been, I've stayed in Gulf Shores or wherever, just somewhere where he would come on somehow that I've seen him." But man, he's great. He really, really is. He tweets a lot, and he's locked in. I have this page that I follow on Twitter. You can or X. You can follow lists, and it has just whatever basically a list by topic. So I follow this weather list that somebody's made. It has 150 or so meteorologists, storm chasers, and all of that in it. It's probably the best thing that I follow on X because it's constant. I'm able to keep up with weather all across the country, wildfires and things that you're not going to see on your local news. You may not even see in your Twitter feed that I can do. And he's involved in that. He's on that list too, that whoever it is that made it. So
I'll have to make sure to find that and follow that as well.
Yeah, I'll send it to you.
Dude, this Brantley turned me on to that last hurricane, to Jeff Piotrowski.
I believe that's how you say it.
Yeah.
Piotrowski,
And he was like, check this guy out. And this was the day before the hurricane came here
YouTube
recently.
Or?
Yeah, so he's YouTube,
he has
Twitter.
YouTube, but he's on Twitter. He's everywhere.
He comes in live.
Stream him everywhere.
Yeah, man, I woke up at like 4:30 that morning when that storm was getting close to coming on shore there, and he was coming live from a parking lot, somewhere in the Big Bend area, Perry, Florida, I believe. And dude, when the amount of information that he was delivering at such a rapid rate that was accurate. And like he's in his truck, he's got the whole radar system in his truck. He's in the middle of the storm. The storm's he is driving. I mean, transformers are blowing up around him. He's not sitting still at a hotel. Like, he is on another level of putting himself in the middle of it. And It was fascinating to watch him. He drove into it. It was coming on in the front eye wall came over. He started driving down the road. Then it's calm, and he's driving down the road. Now he's in the eye wall, and then the back side of the eye wall crossed him as he's driving down the road. I mean, like, this guy gets off in it, man. And his information delivery is so rapid. It's like he's had 12 cups of coffee, like,
wow.
But it's good. So yeah, thank you, Brantley, for that. I watched him the other day chase a storm, and he was stopping in the middle of the road, getting out. I mean, on a 4-lane road, and he was picking up giant things of hail this big out in Oklahoma. You know what I mean? Like, look at this hail. And he's like all intense and like, I mean, you can barely breathe after watching him. You know, he's like, let me hit down the road. I think the storm. I mean, he's just giving you all the technical data. He's so like into it. It's like part of him.
Gotcha.
But yeah, that dude's on another level. Like, he really is.
Well, he's been a consultant, and Reed Timmer, another guy that we've talked about. Of course, he's extreme too, and you can trace a lot of stuff back with Reed Timmer and different shows, Tornado Chasers and stuff like that. Those are the two best that I know of right now. Those are the two at the top of their game. They are at the top of their game. But both, I do believe, I know Reed did for sure. Hopefully Jeff did. But there's a Twister 2 coming out. I love Twister. One of my all-time favorite movies. It just really is. Well, they've consulted with that, and Reed Timmer has said a few things. He doesn't know everything, but they're really going into the science of the tornado and all of that stuff. So that'll be interesting to see how it plays out.
They consulted with Jeff on that, I believe, because he's got pictures of him and what's his name that died that was the main star?
Yeah.
Bill Paxton.
Bill Paxton.
Bill, there we go.
Bill.
He's got a picture of him and Bill Paxton, and he even tells a story of like they were doing the initial release of the movie or whatever, the first viewing, and Bill comes up to him and is like, "Hey, come over here, man!" Like, you know, and they sat there and had a whiskey drink together. Like, but he had consulted with that one. This Jeff Perskowski guy did. So yeah, he's like the real deal. Like, I didn't know people like that existed. Like that we could have.
Well, you normally just think about the normal ones that everyone on national TV, the handful. Al Roker, you know, I mean, and then now since
I love Al
cable television, Jim Cantore, but Al Roker, I mean, Al's the man. Al's gonna give you a general outline of the country. When you're a kid, you're like, wow, that's neat. It's cold there this time of the year, you know, and stuff. When you're talking about other places, but
and made you feel good while doing it. He's just a nice guy. Yeah,
I wish Al Roker was my granddaddy. You know what I mean? That's such a good dude, right?
Hey, I tell you. Down here, we've got one I wish was my uncle also, or cousin or something. Alan Seals. He is Pensacola based now, I believe. But he left and went somewhere and worked Boston or somewhere for 20-something years and came back. But he is great. I mean, he is amazing. When Sharice and I have already adopted him as our go-to when there's anything. We'll listen to, no offense to Ed Bloodsworth and what's the other guy's name? Darwin Singleton and those guys, but we're going to get Alan Seals, report. That's what we're going off of. And he's the same way. He just seems like such a nice guy. You're like, man, I wish I was related to that guy. You know, but
I've got my guy here in Southeast Louisiana. His name's Joe. I'm going to butcher his last name. DeGregorio. Joe DeGregorio. He's on
Joe
Facebook.
DeGregorio.
He's on Joe DeGregorio. Yeah. Hey, this dude is so
Joe
on
DeGregorio.
It's kind of how he talks. You can check him out on YouTube. He has a Facebook page. It's South Louisiana or Southeast Louisiana Extreme Weather. South Louisiana Extreme Weather, but he's not really one that's out in there. He's the guy that's reporting it, watching the radar, watching the maps, watching all of this stuff. Yeah, and man, his accuracy is his accuracy is impeccable. He is a meteorologist, but he consults with movies, with different movie crews and stuff like that, which is something I'd never thought about. But he's talked in some of his live streams that I've watched about how, you know, these movies, they have a meteorologist on board. It's huge for when they're flying and things like that, just different, all kinds of different things that can happen in a movie, just not something I ever thought of. So he consults on things like that. He is a badass.
Right.
There's no other way around it.
That'll open your mind up too, because you know I've worked on some movies and TV background acting stuff, and all the stuff they have to make stuff happen. I'm talking about y'all thousands of people at a place to do little scenes and stuff. It's crazy how many people are involved in all that. But that's not a bad gig either. You're a normal meteorologist for your thing, and then your side hustle is go work on a couple of movies because they only last a couple of months here and there. You know. Yeah. I'm sure they pay well.
Yeah. He said they do. He has some superstars that still reach him. You know. Yeah. People are at heart are weather geeks. Right. I think.
Well, you have to
way more people than you think.
Well, we have to be.
It
It's
is.
in our evolution to be nervous about the weather because floods and fires and shit has
'Cause
killed
we
our
should be.
ancestors. Yeah, right. Because we have to. We should be. Yeah, exactly. We should be. Some people are not, which is crazy. And it's like,
Yeah.
but anyway, that's
This
another
is
topic
happening
for
and it's
another
coming.
day.
What's even more amazing is the ability to forecast this. To me, is mind blowing. Even when
Nowadays,
things don't go
yes.
as planned, they even tell you where things can change
Yeah.
and how this could change and develop a different way. But dude, they've gotten pretty dang good at this. Like
They
like
dropped the
especially
ball
like
on-
hurricanes.
They dropped the ball on Sally for us. That was the one time.
And it happens.
They had
It's
been
like,
really
and
good.
I've seen them come in and do this, and they think it's gone, and all of a sudden this thing wibble wobbles and makes a whole different directional move,
Yep.
and they're like,
know.
it was even with Michael that came on shore here,
But
they thought it was going to
normally-
be like a Category 2 or 3, and then by 5 o'clock in the morning, it's a Category 5, that maybe the strongest storm that ever hit the United
That
States.
sucker
You know,
was nuts.
Yeah.
but like. At the end of the day, they're pretty dang good at giving
pretty
you a
dang
really
good,
good
yep.
heads up at what's
Yep.
going on,
Yep,
man.
yep.
And
Yep.
what about? Let me ask y'all this: so, like in y'all's lifetime, like catastrophic weather events that you've like been I guess been a part of firsthand or witnessed to some level. Like, what are the ones that stand out to you the most?
Katrina for me. I mean, obviously, that was the biggest one I've ever been a part of. I wasn't directly involved in the storm. I wasn't in the storm. I lived here in Baton Rouge, but the way that it affected everything moving forward, it still is in Baton Rouge. Like the traffic, the amount of people that moved to Baton Rouge overnight, the size of the place doubled. The infrastructure here was not ready for that. Where I worked at one time when I lived in Florida with Hogan Hardwoods, we had a place here in Baton Rouge. They had a place in New Orleans as well. It was flooded. We were able to go in and send 70 or 80 trucks into New Orleans a handful of days after the storm and recover our wood, which most of it had not gotten wet. You know, some of it had, but most of it had not miraculously hadn't flooded there. And the wind damage was bad, but not as bad as it was, you know, over in Biloxi and over Gulfport and past Christiane and all through there, where they just got ravaged. And it's not even really talked about as much as it's just the flood that was in New Orleans. But the whole Gulf South, it changed the commerce, it changed the economy, it changed the population, and it changed where everybody left. So it's pretty easy to hone in on Katrina being the biggest thing, biggest weather event that I've been involved in.
Monster flood event. You know what I mean? Anytime whatever storm it is turns into a flood event, that's when things become truly catastrophic. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like it's
the second one very quickly is the flood. Baton Rouge had a horrendous flood in 2016. There was 20-something inches of rain that was dropped in Denham Springs. It flooded in Baton Rouge, but it really flooded just east of us. My friends at Gator Millworks, their shop flooded. It had, I think 12 feet of water. It may have been even more than that. Everything. It killed everything. But they are tough, dude. They were back operating. They missed hardly any days, miraculously. Now, it was a period of recovering, and they've dug in. I look forward to having Chad on the show to talk about that story of resiliency and all, because that's something that you live with when you live in Louisiana. You have to live with floods and flooding and all of that. That was 100-year flood or 1,000-year flood, as they say it. And then, you know, we had another one in Baton Rouge, another flash flood not long after that. It's just a lot of things in these cities. They're not prepared. It's concrete jungles. The drainage isn't there. The soil can't soak it up anymore. There's nowhere for the water to go. And so those floods, those are the biggest thing that I've dealt with in Louisiana and in my life. And I've been listening to this audiobook on Audible about Huey P. Long called Kingfish. I'm just kind of interested in listening to some of that stuff and just hearing it again. And one of the things, kind of where I've stopped at right now, they're talking about Louisiana 1927, the flood down in Plaquemine and St. Bernard Parish, where they blew the levee to relieve the river, and then you can go all deep into that. There's a lot of conspiracy theories and everything on why that was done and all, but floods, man, floods in Louisiana just go hand in hand. I'll get off my soapbox.
It's the bottom of the Mississippi. It's the bottom of the Mississippi River.
All the water's got to go somewhere.
That's
man.
why you don't bury people. That's why they're above ground over there in those places.
I had cousins in that Denham Springs area when that went down. Some of my grandmother's family, and it was rough, buddy. I'm talking about flooded their whole. They were like total loss. I mean, total life jackets and stuff. I think the whole it was crazy.
Yeah,
they're tough
it
and
was
rough
insane.
gals, but man,
what about you, JR? Like,
scared.
Yeah.
What kind of
obviously
like
Katrina
what's a
comes
big
to
event?
mind.
Yeah,
Katrina comes to mind because it was I was an adult and I knew the impact and watched it and had that and Ivan down here when all that went down. I remember it changed the down here. And then recently, Sally and Zeta, we were here, we were at home for those, and Sally was a lot worse than it seemed. And then I've never been through one like that. About 6-7 years ago, there was a category 1 or 2 when we were living at the condo, and it came through. But we were in a big superstructure, and it wasn't that bad. But Sally dumped a lot of water and stayed and went slow, and a lot of wind damage. So walking out of the house after that, being in the house scared, for 6-7 hours straight, and then going out the next day and seeing the damage was like, oh my God. It took a long time to get straightened up after that. It's still not all the way, but growing up, on Lake Martin and in central Alabama and even in Mississippi, my grandparents are from, my mom's from, tornadoes, and afternoon thunderstorms in the summer could be just as violent as you could imagine, but they were usually short-lived. That hurricane was like 6 hours worth of a good tornado right close to you.
Right.
But those storms growing up on the lake in the afternoon with the lightning and stuff, man, that was some strong stuff. And, I wasn't around for the big tornado that came through Alabama and did all the damage.
I remember seeing footage of a horrific big boat, boat
and
sheds on Lake Martin.
I saw a year or so later the path that it cut near where the amphitheater is, and it stopped at the water. Then it went look across the lake, and you can see it start up. And it was about 3/4 of a mile wide. And it looked like it'd been clear cut on purpose, but that was where the storm had went through. It was wild looking. But I wasn't there for that. But those storms on the lake, I can remember being with my dad in a boat fishing. And it'd be a beautiful day, and then you look over, and it's dark over there, it's starting to, and then look over 2 minutes later, and it's black, and it's coming. And us trying to run from Chimney Rock, the storm's coming from the dam, and we got to turn and go home. So we're trying to, it's coming, and us,
it gets
a
hairy.
little John boat, that kind of stuff. I remember that. Lately, heat stuff too, being places where it's hot and dry. I just got back from Salt Lake City, Utah, and Denver, Colorado, and it was fairly warm in the daytime and pretty cool at night. But man, it's so dry. Just a different type of weather, different type of climate, elevation, all that stuff. It's just it's weird because you think one thing, but everywhere has their own whole different system of stuff to have to deal with.
You get into a blizzard situation. That's just a whole nother animal that we're not used to dealing with.
I have no experience. I have very little experience with any kind of snow and stuff. Nashville, we got some. I remember being really, that's a memory there. Coming back from the gym one time in Nashville, knew it was going to get a little cool that night and might rain or might snow a little. Well, I left the gym, went to the gym a little later than I wanted to, and I'm coming home and it's already gotten dark, and I'm in flip-flops, gym clothes, tired. I'm in my car that I had before I had my truck. And on the way home, it's snowing and it's getting thick. And I go to get off my exit, and it don't look like it doesn't look like a good option.
Oh, Lord.
So I went to the next exit, turned, going to go the back way to my house, looked down a road, black and white road. No one had been down. I said, that's not a good option either. And I'm not prepared. I don't have clothes to be walking in 20-something degrees for a couple of miles right now, and it's I lived out in the sticks, so I got back on Briley Parkway, started heading back into town, and I got behind an 18-wheeler that was going to my exit because my exit had a UPS terminal at it. So I followed that UPS truck, and he went left and I went right, and I thought, this is the shortest distance between my house and here. If anything goes wrong, I'm just going to have to hoof it. And buddy, that last mile and a half, 2 miles, 10 and 2, my booty was tight trying to make sure I made it home. But we did. But that was a scary one, and that was just like you say, we're not prepared. Like at home, you kind of know. Or in Central Alabama where I grew up, if there was a little ice or a little chance of some freezing and ice, man, they would shut stuff down. You wouldn't do
you just
much.
don't go.
They didn't have the equipment to deal with it and all. Yeah,
Nashville's
They still do
pretty,
it in that.
Yeah, it's farther north than you would think, so it gets
happens more often.
A lot
does.
more. Yeah, they're going to
It
get
does.
snow a few times a year there and ice. I can remember my brother and I when he had moved up, going to go try to get a master's or some form of continuing education at one of the schools around Nashville, and we were on campus somewhere, and he had walked back in from the place, and it started raining. We were like, "Oh, this is pretty," and within 10 minutes, it was the heaviest blizzard storm snow either one of us had ever seen to that point in our lives. It was fine. We made it. It wasn't sticking or anything, but it was huge. We were like, God, this is Tennessee? We didn't know Tennessee had this much,
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
But I remember some of those, and then growing up on that lake, there were some those lightning and stuff popping. Lightning's the one that gets me. I still give me the heebie-jeebies. I know.
Ooh.
I've met.
I respect lightning. I respect lightning more than as much as anybody.
Yeah, it hit near my house one time. I got some residuals through the house. I don't know if I told y'all that story. It came through. I hit outside.
Oh, yeah, dude.
Came through the mouse, pushed me back. All I remember is it felt like I saw a blue energy ball in my lap, and I was pushed away, and my arm was locked up like this for like 30 minutes. I could not straighten it out.
Wow.
It was wild.
Oh,
And
you got
so it must have hit
Holy
the house outside or something.
Yeah.
and I
It
got
came
some
on
of
through
it.
you.
But it didn't fry the computer. I called my mom and told her, and she's like, "Are you kidding me?" I was like, "No." I was like, "I'm just letting you know. Call me back in an hour. Make sure I'm not, I don't fall out from a heart attack or something, because it's still storming. I'm in this house that's as big as my studio, windows on every wall. I'm sitting in the middle, like there's nowhere to go. There's no. What do I do? I don't want to get hit again though, because my one arm's still like this. And I would try. I was like
T-Rex arm.
Yeah, it would keep popping up. I'd get it down. I was like,
Wow.
"Whoa, that is." So it was like when you do the pads to make your, the electrodes to make your.
Yeah,
Yeah, you got struck by lightning, man. Is what happened.
Yeah,
big
you really did.
I mean, you can call it what you want to. You got struck by lightning. You're sitting there like
I was
this.
on my
and I was taking your arm out.
I was on my computer, and it was an old school desktop computer, on a desk, a metal desk, and the mouse was wired to the computer. Yeah, and I remember it hit, and I'm thinking, wow, it's getting bad. And it made like a noise, almost like a hiss, and then a pop. And then I remember literally, it seemed in my mind, like a blue, like Mortal Kombat or Street Fighter,
Like an energy ball that you think I can
right
create.
in my lap. And then it pushed me back, not far, but about a foot back in my rolling thing, and my arm went like this, and I was like, "Oh my gosh!" And I'm like, "Oh," then I'm freaking out. So then I called my mom, like,
Wow.
"Hey, I was home alone,
Man.
a little tiny house." Anyway, that was one I didn't even think about, but yeah, that and I've met, and I'm sure y'all have too. I've met several people in my life that have been hit by lightning multiple times and things like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean, it's funny. Like JR, you just triggered so many thoughts. I got my board. I got a little board here, and it's changing, and I've got to figure out how to wrap this. Like, we can do like a
Blasi,
subset thing.
I've got to interrupt you because I know one that you have to tell immediately right now. You've got to tell the story about about that guy that you spoke to his daughter. That been struck by lightning.
I spoke to his sister-in-law. Yeah, I'm still trying to chase her down. And I want to get her on here. He's a guy. It's Melvin. What is it? Melvin Roberts, I believe, out of South Carolina, and he's been struck by lightning, I believe, 12 times. Now he's deceased now, and it was a result finally of all the lightning strikes. But
Oh my God!
but no, I mean I'd laugh because all right, so. What you're talking about, JR, I got struck by lightning. Like, I feel like it was an indirect hit, too. I was on my back porch. There were a bunch of people on my porch. It was under roof, and I had a screen door, and I stepped out onto a little concrete pad to, use the bathroom real quick, kind of just barely off the porch. But
had your hand on the screen door?
Yes, and lightning hit. Dude, knocked me backwards. I mean, I lit up, and my whole body became just like, buzzing, like
friend in high school, same thing, screen door. And another time he was on a landline telephone. My buddy Jake Hill, a friend of mine in high school. So same thing. Went to go inside, storming, grabbed the screen door to open it, popped somewhere. Boom, he wakes up on the ground. Another time in the house, same thing. Yeah, so you don't know if it's direct. You don't. It couldn't be direct.
No, it didn't just hit me in the top of the head, but
right, same with mine.
It came,
but somehow
it hit roots.
Dude,
it's still enough.
I walked in like my legs weren't working right. I had to sit down. Like I was affected highly,
Wow.
And so I think about that, and I was Googling one day trying to find out people who had been hit, and I Googled this Melvin Roberts guy and found him, and I found his Facebook page, and I just kept digging because it was like 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning. I was up, I just happened to wake up early. And I sent a Facebook page he's got. I sent a message, and then, dude, I got a response. Actually, I didn't get a response. I got a phone call within like 30 minutes. At like 4:45 in the morning, I'm getting a phone call, but I didn't answer it. I was like, well, this is strange. And it was his sister-in-law from Ohio calling me, and she was going to tell me all about him, but he was now deceased. And I'm still trying to chase her down. Summer's a busy time of the year for her, and so we're still trying to coordinate something.
Right.
But I want to get him on. But this dude has been struck more than anybody on the planet to record, and he's out of South Carolina. But so that's to Brantley's point. That's something that's pretty crazy. That whole lightning thing, dude, if lightning gets anywhere near, and I play golf, or I used to play more golf. And lightning would get nearby.
Think about how many movies they show things like that. Like the guy that got struck a lot in Great Outdoors, like this guy you're talking about. That's a real life.
And I believe some people are more, lightning's attracted to more people than others for whatever reason. And I think I'm up there on that upper echelon because when I was a kid, I was out in the middle of a field between my grandmother's apartments. And thank God, as a child, I was scared enough when things felt weird. I knew to run because God gifted me with speed. Yep. So I would take off running if something got strange. You know what I mean? Whatever it was, whatever the moment was. I don't care if some dude was looking at me strange and he was, driving a creepy van or whatever. I would just run. Like, good luck catching me.
I was running.
And I was feeling real weird, dude. It was like my hair was like lifting up, and I was just like, why do I feel so strange? And I just took off just as fast as I could run towards his apartment. Dude, I ran maybe 50 yards, and lightning hit right where I was. I mean, I turned around, it hit a cell phone tower. It wasn't a cell phone tower at the time, a big tower.
Telephone
it was no cell
tower,
phones then. Yes, and hit that and hit right back there in that field, and I was like, and then I get hit again here indirectly. So I've been
this is confirming all the
lightning,
things I've known last 25 years of my life. I knew when after the first time I met Blasi, he might be a living superhero or alien of some sort living in a human body, and it now confirmed he is Lightning Man. Blasi is Lightning Man,
brother. I don't mess with it
himself
because somewhere in my mind I think lightning is here to take me out. And
and that's why
I wouldn't even go from my front door to my garbage can if lightning gets within 2 or 3 miles. Like I'm not chancing it.
I'm not either. I'm the polar opposite of Blasi, and I feel that I'm not fast.
Oh man,
and
on the
I
golf
feel
course,
that
I'm the first
coming
one.
for me.
I
It is
think, boys, it's time to go to
for
the clubhouse, and they're like, "What's going on?" I'm like, "Dude, I'm not screwing around with this lightning.
Mm-mm.
Like I'm
like,
not doing
what can
it."
I get under? That's me.
I'm not doing it.
Under. I'm gonna
and I've been
like
at golf tournaments, and we're standing on the back porch, and I remember there was a pine tree literally 10 feet from me. And I'm standing there talking to this lady that I knew. She was older than me. I grew up, with her son. And dude, lightning hits this tree, and we're right next to this tree, and it's like, and I'm just going, guys, lightning is after me, and I respect it so much.
Well, I'm glad you're fast, and you've got to outrun all this lightning over these years.
And if lightning came right now, I'd probably spend the night out here in my studio. You know what I mean? Like I just don't mess around with it.
I would not. I don't take a chance. Even between thunders, like boom, okay, I can run 15 feet to get there.
Nope.
It petrifies me. It really does. Yeah. It's one of the only things that I'm like truly, truly scared of. I used to fish. Have you ever been fishing and watched your fishing line just float up? Because when you're, I've been in some hairy situations on Toledo Bend where I grew up fishing, and kind of it's like those storms that'll pop up just like on Lake Martin. I mean, when you feel that first little breath, baby breath, I call it, blow, and you see dark clouds, you better rip. You better get up, get your stuff, and get back to the boat launch because that lake will get so rough.
The worst is being stuck on the lake. Like we've had to do this, and I've had to do this recently. Well, several years ago now, but be out there and you can't get anywhere. You're too far from home. You have to just go to an island, and you get on an island, and on the island's nothing but pine trees, and we know what they'll do to pine trees.
Oh,
we might have to. I know Blasi's got time commitments today because he's a busy man. He's Captain Lightning, but we might have to do another episode on weather, and maybe we should see if we can get an actual meteorologist or weather person to come on and talk a little weather with us, and we'll have an episode 2 of the weather.
I
that
think
would be
so.
great to do something like that.
Yeah.
Man.
Well, I had an opportunity this past weekend at the LSU at a tailgate. So I'm sitting there, and there's a meteorologist here in Baton Rouge. He is one of my favorite meteorologists, Dr. Steve Caparetta. He's on the local news. He is money on his forecast. The dude he's fantastic. Well, he was good for he's good friends with my a guy I work with, David and Mindy Marks, and I saw them over there talking, and I went, oh God, here's my chance. I'm going to go talk to Dr. Steve. And then I got to Dr. Steve and Mindy and David, and they know I'm a weather nut. They know how I am, and I just absolutely fumbled the ball, man. I mean, I got so starstruck. Like we've talked to DDP on here. We've had Taylor Hicks. We've had Marty Smith. Blasi's interviewed DeMarcus Ware. Yeah, I mean, we've had all of these people, but I absolutely melted in front of Dr. Steve Caparetta, and I could not get out my. Well, it's a very nice. It's a pleasure to meet you, Dr. Steve. Man, I love the weather. I love the weather. I got a big weather guy. I couldn't get it out. I couldn't talk. Just absolutely just. And the worst thing, a lot of my friends were all around, and they kind of saw it. They watched it go down.
Like
so
is this Brantley doing this? Like what is happening?
It happens.
Here?
I've done
Dude,
it. Oh,
I've
done it. Oh, I've done it. Oh, hell yeah.
But I'd love to get Dr. Steve on the show.
I will add one more storm story because we got off on a tangent because JR threw me off with the lightning.
Sorry, buddy.
I'll break this down real fast, and I'll wrap it up in 60 seconds almost. So I grew up in Elba. We had the levee system in that little town, and I grew up inside the levee from 73 to 84 and didn't have anything catastrophic happen. I'd heard about the 1929 flood. There was one in the late 70s, but it didn't get super bad. In 90, the levee, failed and just filled the town up. I mean, the courthouse, the town, everything downtown was like 15 feet underwater. And then happened again in 90. And so I've dealt with that growing up, seeing like what floods can do to an area. Like, and a flood's it's even a slower creeping thing than a hurricane, because even after the storm passes, you got to watch for that, that flood level to keep rising. But the craziest thing I've probably ever been a part of, and I didn't think about it till you talked about Nashville, was I was living in Birmingham from 2012 to 2015, and they had that snowpocalypse take place.
Yes.
And I took my son to school. I was living in Hoover, took him to school that morning, and I promised him, I said, if it starts to snow, they were just talking about it might snow, and it was going to probably melt pretty quick after, because the temperatures were going to get maybe down to 32, 31, and then rise back up to about 35. I was like, I'll check you out of school, and you can come watch it snow. Well, sure enough, about 9 a.m., I was working from the house that day. It started to snow. I was like, as promised, I'm going to go check him out. So I went and checked him out. We came back to the house, get back home, and I was like, hey, you want to go to Beef O'Brady's and have lunch? This was probably 10:30, almost 11 o'clock. Let's go to Beef O'Brady's. And I went to leave the neighborhood, and the neighborhood I was in was kind of sits down. So we went to leave, and you got to go up a little hill to get up on the final. Any way you leave that neighborhood, you got to go up a little hill. And, dude, there were cars that were already, had crashed into each other trying to leave the neighborhood on that ice slopes. And so I was like, well, I guess we'll take the back exit. They've got some craziness going on with this one, so I couldn't leave the back exit. And then I was like, we can't go anywhere. So I ended up going back to the house, dude. And then that's when that madness happened. Dude, there were 12,000 kids that spent the night in schools that night. And JD, buddy JD, he had a four-wheel drive, and there's a good steak place, or what's it called? Cajun Cleaver, I think. He stopped in there. He couldn't make it back to Gardendale, so he wiggles his way back to us and picks up some fine steaks. Dude, we grill steaks that night. JD spends the night. We have a fabulous night. Dude, I'm watching. It was like like the apocalypse. People are walking up and down the roads, like, because all cars are seized up. Nobody can drive anywhere. They were grilling steaks, hanging out, having a good evening. My next door neighbor's son got stranded at school. The next morning at about 7 a.m., we went in JD's truck. He had a good four-wheel drive, and we went and picked him up from the school, brought him back. But, dude, that was a crazy weather event because that weather went from like 31, 32, dropped down to like 19. And every meteorologist thought it was supposed to go up to like 35. Like, they missed it so bad, and it just turned into just it's like a sheet of ice covered Birmingham. So,
wow.
Yeah, so that's probably the craziest weather event outside of the hurricanes, Ivan, Opal that I've been a part of, and the floods. That was so bizarre because it threw everybody off, and nobody knew it was coming, and it was just
it's like you said earlier, they're usually they're really good. It's really good. I don't know what the percentage would be, but I bet 75-80% of the time they nail it pretty dang close. But then that other 20, boy, but it's unpredictable. It's Mother Nature. She's undefeated. And, you know, we all do. When we come back and do the weather part 2, we should talk about good weather. We've talked about bad weather. We should talk about some good weather, too.
Let's talk about the good stuff.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Love some good weather like we're having right now. We're having some really good weather right now, boys.
Let's go enjoy it. Well,
That's right.
I know I had a good time this week. Thank y'all for having me on. Thanks, everybody, for listening. Same bat time, same bat place, boys and girls. Thank y'all.
Thank you. See ya.